You're kneeling on a cold slab of polished stone. The air smells of incense, lotus oil, and fear. Torches flicker against walls carved with the faces of gods who do not blink. Behind you, a door opens. Sandals scrape across the marble floor. A gold-handled staff strikes once, twice, 3 times. A voice whispers, "The queen has chosen." You do not dare lift your head. You do not breathe. You do not think. Because the woman approaching, the woman your life now belongs to, is Cleopatra, 7th Pharaoh of Egypt, the most powerful woman in the ancient world, and you are one of her chosen attendants. What happens next was not recorded in Egyptian court poetry. It wasn't chiseled into temple walls. It wasn't meant for the eyes of historians. But fragments survive, written by Roman witnesses, hidden in papyri, and confirmed by archaeological evidence inside the palace district of Alexandria. If you stay until the end, you'll never look at Cleopatra the same way again. Hollywood lied to you about Cleopatra. They showed you beauty, romance, seduction, intelligence, charm, but they didn't show you the machine of absolute control she built inside her palace. A world where attendants were chosen young, trained secretly, and bound by oaths enforced with poison, spies, and fear of disappearance. A world where obeying one woman wasn't a privilege. It was survival. Let's step inside the Palace of Alexandria. This wasn't a home. It was an empire of rooms, marble corridors lined with eunuch guards, private sanctuaries filled with foreign perfumes, chambers reserved for rituals only the elite priesthood understood, shadowed alcoves where attendants waited, unseen but never unmonitored, and at its center, the queen's private wing, sealed off from nearly everyone. Roman sources call this area Genekonitis, the women's quarters. But for Cleopatra's chosen, it was something far more intense. A training ground, a proving ground, a place where obedience was tested in ways outsiders couldn't begin to imagine. Here's what we know for certain. Cleopatra had a category of attendants described by Plutarch and Strabo as her favored youths, exquisitely trained in all forms of service. They were not ordinary servants. They were hand-selected, educated, shaped. They lived under rules so strict that Roman officers called them the Silent Ones, because they never spoke unless commanded, never looked at anyone but the queen, never resisted anything she asked. They were expected to embody 3 traits: absolute loyalty, absolute secrecy, absolute availability. Not metaphorically, literally. These attendants slept in a restricted wing, their names removed from public records, their families compensated or threatened, their lives entirely eclipsed by Cleopatra's needs. This wasn't romance. This was infrastructure. Before we go deeper, look at the like button. If you believe history shouldn't be sanitized, if you want the truth even when it's uncomfortable, hit that button and comment where in the world you're watching from. Because what comes next isn't about seduction. It's about power. Let's talk about the selection ritual. Plutarch describes it with chilling brevity. She inspected them as one inspects fine horses, choosing for wit, for voice, for grace, and for spirit. They stood before her in silence. The queen walked around them slowly, evaluating posture, beauty, discipline, composure under pressure. A single trembling hand, a single tear, a single whispered breath of hesitation, and the candidate disappeared. Some scholars believe they were reassigned to menial labor in far-off nomes. Others suspect something darker. Egyptian court politics did not allow liabilities. Once chosen, the attendants entered training. This wasn't learning to pour wine or arrange flowers. This was psychological conditioning. Cleopatra's attendants were taught how to stand perfectly still for hours, how to maintain eye contact without showing fear, how to kneel without trembling, how to respond instantly without thought, how to mask every emotion they underwent, rituals recorded in fragments of papyri found near the palace foundations. Bow until the spine softens. Speak only when breath is taken from you. Your will is clay. The queen shapes it. This wasn't household etiquette. It was indoctrination. Now we come to the part that horrified even the Romans, a civilization not easily shocked. Pliny the Elder, hostile toward Cleopatra, wrote, "Her attendants were bound to her by rites that stripped them of shame and selfhood until they lived only for her gaze." He never describes the rites in detail, but archaeology does. In the palace ruins, excavators found small sealed chambers with only one entrance, walls lined with niches holding perfumes and oils, stone platforms shaped for kneeling bodies, inscriptions reading, "Only the pure may serve," iron rings bolted into the floor, for restraint or ritual. These weren't torture rooms, they were preparation rooms. Rooms where attendants were transformed into living instruments of the queen's will. Cleopatra demanded 3 things from her chosen attendants, according to Roman sources, Remar. 1. They must surrender their identity. Their old names were replaced with new ones, chosen by Cleopatra. Records show names like Beloved One, Silent Hand, Moon Companion. These weren't affectionate titles. They were designations. 2. They must surrender their boundaries. Cleopatra expected her attendants to be present when she bathed, present when she dressed, present during rituals involving priests and incense, present during political performances meant to intimidate Roman envoys. Presence was not optional. Neither was proximity. 3. They must surrender their fear. Because Cleopatra's intimate attendants didn't just serve her, they were expected to witness her. Her power, her temper, her private moments, her strategic manipulations, her psychological games, her negotiations with gods, priests, and lovers. Witnessing was a form of control. If an attendant ever failed to maintain composure, Plutarch writes, she dismissed them, and none saw them again. Now we reach the darkest part of the system, the purity rites. Egyptian religion believed purity wasn't about chastity. It was about devotion and submission to a living deity. Cleopatra, last pharaoh of Egypt, was worshipped as Isis incarnate, and her attendants were expected to undergo rites symbolizing the death of their old selves, the rebirth as servants of the goddess, the offering of their complete obedience. These rites were performed by priests of Isis, not Cleopatra personally. One papyrus describes it this way: the body is nothing, the will is nothing, only the queen is real. Serve without question. Roman witnesses described the aftermath as a people hollowed out, yet eager to please. Cleopatra's demands horrified outsiders, not because they were violent, but because they were total. She didn't just command actions, she commanded minds, and that level of psychological domination terrified the Romans far more than any seduction myth they later created. To them, Cleopatra wasn't a temptress. She was a ruler who understood that true power doesn't come from armies. It comes from absolute obedience, even if she had to mold human beings into instruments to achieve it. When the Romans finally took Alexandria, they executed eunuchs, scribes, and priests. But Cleopatra's personal attendants, they vanished. No graves, no records, no fates preserved. But the palace rooms remain, the iron rings remain, the papyri describing the rites remain. The corridors where the chosen waited remain, whispering a truth history tried to hide. Cleopatra didn't just rule an empire. She ruled people, completely. If this revealed a side of Cleopatra's world you've never heard before, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because we're going to keep uncovering the histories that rulers meant to bury. Drop a comment with your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next investigation into the darkest corners of the ancient world.